The last time I stepped into the Paramount Hotel, I was asked to use the service entrance. I was 29 then, in a pressed gray suit and worn heels, clutching a proposal that took me 3 years to develop. I remember the way the receptionist flinched when she saw my name, Juliette Sloan. My mother had warned them I might show up trying to prove something. My father never looked up from his scotch when he rejected the plan. And my younger brother Blake smirked, said something about how consultants don't build empires, they rearrange napkins. That was 4 years ago. This morning, my assistant, Adrian, forwarded me an email, a formal request from the Evans family, that I refrain from attending the annual Innovation in Hospitality Awards. The reason my presence might confuse the press. They didn't know I already owned 49.7% of Paramount Hotels. As I stood by the window of my penthouse, watching Manhattan stretch toward the sky, I sipped my espresso and opened the takeover dashboard on my tablet. Legal PR operations all green. Ready? Adrian asked quietly behind me. I nodded calm. Let's begin. If they're going to ban me from their hotel, I think it's time I rename it. I still remember the room, the way the light hit the polished conference table, the faint hum of the AC, and the heavy silence that followed my last slide. My voice had been steady. I'd spent months refining that presentation, sustainable luxury practices, AI-driven personalization, data-enhanced guest retention. It wasn't just numbers and buzzwords. It was the future of hospitality. Their hotel was bleeding relevance, and I was offering a lifeline. A modern one. My father swirled his drink, not even pretending to read the summary pages. Paramount has survived for over 60 years without digital gimmicks, he said without looking at me. I waited. My mother leaned back in her chair, fingers draped in diamonds, tapping against the leather armrest. Juliette, sweetie, she said, voice smooth as glass. You've always had such energy. But this isn't your world. You're a systems girl, a back-end planner. We need visionaries, not spreadsheets. My jaw tightened. You mean Blake? They exchanged glances, barely concealed pride flashing between them. Blake, who'd been leaning with his arms crossed in the corner, chuckled. Hey, I changed the minibar options last quarter, and profits went up 12%. Maybe I should pitch that to Forbes. They all laughed. I didn't. That night, I walked out of the Paramount's flagship boardroom and into the street, with nothing but my laptop bag and a stomach full of ice. I sat on a bench near 42nd Street for almost 2 hours, just watching cabs pass. Something had cracked inside me, not from rejection, but from the certainty that nothing I did would ever be enough for them to see me. So I stopped trying. That was the night I registered Sloan Global Ventures. I didn't have capital, not much, but I had knowledge. I'd spent years consulting for boutique hotels that the Evans family never looked twice at. I knew which properties were vulnerable. I knew which were undervalued. And more importantly, I knew what modern travelers wanted before they knew it themselves. So I started small. A struggling wellness lodge in Vermont. A beach resort in Mexico whose owner was willing to sell for equity in a future that didn't exist yet. I built algorithms in my apartment, ran performance projections from borrowed office space, pitched to investors during lunch breaks, and every time I thought of giving up, I replayed Blake's voice in my head. Consultants don't build empires. Good. Because I wasn't just going to build one. I was going to buy theirs. The first year was brutal. I worked out of a co-working basement space that reeked of printer ink and burnt coffee. My desk was a fold-out table, wedged between a blockchain startup and a man building a dating app for people who hated dating. Every morning, I'd map out operations for my tiny but growing portfolio, while Adrian, then just a freelancer I met in a hotel tech forum, scouted distressed properties like a sniper picking off targets. Most of the hotels I acquired had one thing in common. They were ignored. Forgotten by corporate chains, abandoned by owners who didn't understand the shift in guest behavior. But I understood it. I'd spent years collecting the data the Evans family had dismissed. I knew which amenities mattered, what time guests checked their room temp, what they didn't say in feedback forms, but always meant. Within 2 years, Sloan Global Ventures held 9 boutique hotels across 4 countries. By year 3, that number tripled. The Evans family didn't notice. Why would they? None of the properties bore my name. I didn't brand them like trophies. I integrated them like infrastructure. My empire wasn't built to be admired. It was built to be underestimated. Paramount Hotels, meanwhile, was declining by the quarter. Their marketing budget doubled, their occupancy dipped. They invested in loyalty programs no one used and redecorated lobbies instead of fixing digital booking issues. But worst of all, they started copying surface-level trends without understanding them. Blake once added a wellness basket to every sweet protein bars and lavender oil, then wondered why their reviews dropped when guests complained about the mold in their air vents. Adrienne began tracking Paramount's stock. "They've started bleeding institutional investors," she said one morning, passing me a printed chart with a red curve that sloped like defeat. 3 hedge funds exited last quarter. That's when we made the decision. We were going to buy them. Not overnight. That wasn't how you took down an empire built on entitlement. No, we would do it the way they ignored me, silently, consistently, and with complete confidence. We formed shell companies, acquired minority shares, partnered with former suppliers who were furious about unpaid invoices. By the time Paramount launched their next-generation campaign, complete with glossy ads and a website refresh, we already owned 19% of the company. "Let them smile for the cameras," I told Adrienne. "We'll own the spotlight they're posing in soon enough." She smirked. "You planning to tell them before or after you change the locks?" after I said, watching the Paramount homepage flicker on my screen. Blake's face was on the banner, grinning like he'd done something important. I closed the tab. We had more work to do. By the time we crossed the 30% mark, I knew every board member by name and, more importantly, by their pressure points. Some were easy. Old-school investors still clinging to loyalty dividends and retirement funds. Others required finesse quiet lunches, limited disclosures projections whispered like promises. I never lied. I didn't need to. The truth was compelling enough. Paramount Hotels was sinking, and Sloan Global was the only vessel staying afloat. We masked our purchases behind layered shell entities. Adrienne coordinated transfers through Cayman intermediaries and equity trusts in Delaware. The Evans family remained blissfully unaware. At 43%, they still held majority control, but their position was weakening. Their pride wouldn't let them look over their shoulders, and we made sure to move in the silence behind them. The final push was the most delicate. We waited until the week of the Innovation in Hospitality Awards, the Evans family's favorite stage. It was tradition the family hosted the awards at their flagship property in Boston, handed trophies to each other, toasted to vision, in front of a crowd too polite to question the decay behind the gold trim. "They're giving Blake the Visionary Award," Adrienne told me, one eyebrow raised. "For what? Adding QR codes to the breakfast menu." "Don't underestimate the boldness of mediocrity," I said, smiling faintly. "Let them hand him the crown. We'll take the throne." The ceremony would be live-streamed, attended by industry veterans, ratings organizations, even silent investors. A perfect convergence. We scheduled our final acquisitions to clear during the event. I booked a room at the Paramount under a different name. 3 hours before the ceremony, Adrienne texted me from the boardroom, 46.8% confirmed. Legal on standby. 1 block left. I stared at my reflection in the hotel mirror. Chanel navy, clean lines hair, pulled tight. My mother used to say I overdressed when I was insecure. I now understood I wasn't overdressed. I was armoring. The next notification came just before I stepped into the elevator. 49.7%. I smiled. The number meant everything and nothing. Technically still a minority stake, but enough to scare them, enough to control the room. Then came the email. Sent from the Evans family's PR team, addressed not to me, but to my assistant, clearly assuming I wouldn't attend. The language was surgical. "We respectfully request Ms. Sloan refrain from appearing at the ceremony to avoid confusion regarding brand identity and press perception." Confusion? I almost laughed. I forwarded the email to Adrienne. Then I wrote one line back. "Let them have their stage. We'll bring the lights." The valet barely glanced at me as I stepped out of the black SUV, which was exactly what I wanted. I moved through the front entrance of the Paramount Hotel, like a guest, not a disruption. My heels echoed across the marble lobby, past staff members who either didn't recognize me or had been told not to. At the reception desk, a young manager approached a tablet clutched nervously in his hands. "Ms. Sloan," he said, eyes flicking toward a note on the screen. Your family has requested that you use the west entrance to avoid disrupting the flow of guests. I tilted my head slightly, then offered him a smile I'd practiced in 100 boardrooms. That won't be necessary, I said gently. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. I walked through the main hall, past old chandeliers that hadn't been updated since before I was born. I noticed the fraying edges of the carpet, the flickering light near the east exit, small details that no one in the Evans family would have thought important. But I saw everything. The ballroom doors opened with a quiet hush. Gold-trimmed walls, ivory linen tables, champagne flutes already half-filled, guests in tailored tuxedos and satin gowns, familiar faces, executives, investors, analysts, many of whom now worked for me, whether they knew it or not. My mother stood near the stage in emerald silk, laughing too loudly. My father shook hands with a venture partner I'd already bought out 2 quarters ago. Blake was working the crowd like a low-budget politician, stopping for selfies with junior managers and vendors. I didn't approach them. I took a seat near the center aisle, just 3 rows back from the stage. Adrienne was already there, tapping her screen subtly. "Live feed is prepped," she whispered. "Final tranche clears in 20 minutes. That puts full control at 51.2%. I exhaled slowly. Blake spotted me then. He hesitated for a second, long enough to register confusion, maybe irritation, then pasted on a grin and swaggered over. Well, well, he said, arms wide. Didn't expect the prodigal spreadsheet to show up. You lost jewels? I never get lost in buildings I designed, I said, accepting the champagne handed to me by a passing waiter. It was a cheap vintage. I made a mental note to remove it from the supplier list. He blinked. Still into those analytics, huh? You should check out my room service report from last month. Changed the font, guest orders jumped 6%. Probably the kerning. I smiled tightly. You're practically a prophet. He wandered off before I could stab him with a napkin. The lights dimmed. A spotlight found my father at the podium. He launched into the opening remarks, rehearsed and hollow like always. He boomed about legacy, innovation, family. My mother nodded along, eyes sweeping the crowd for approval. Blake looked ready to ascend into sainthood. I checked my phone. 2 minutes. Adrienne's voice came softly through the earpiece. System armed, press packet queued. Your call. I stood slowly. Let them finish their applause. Let them believe it was still their night. And then we would light the whole room with truth. The applause hadn't even died down when every screen in the ballroom flickered. At first, most guests thought it was part of the ceremony, some elaborate brand animation maybe. But the Paramount logo disappeared, replaced by a dashboard, charts, numbers, and then words no hotel executive ever once broadcast at a gala: occupancy decline, 38%, guest satisfaction down, 42%, pending downgrade 5-star review board in reassessment. A hush fell across the room like someone had shut off the air. My father froze at the podium, blinking against the glow of his own failure. My mother stood clutching her clutch, like it might help her disappear. Blake's hand was still midwave when the screen behind him changed to highlight executive overspending, non-reimbursable expenses, Q3. He lowered his arm. Juliette, my father barked voice, rising above the static confusion. What the hell is this? I took one deliberate step into the aisle, every eye in the room pulling toward me like tied to gravity. This, I said calmly, is a presentation. You never let me finish mine the first time. Gasps, whispers, cameras lifting into position. You need to leave, my mother hissed from the front row, face pale beneath perfect makeup. You're humiliating yourself. I turned toward her. I'm not the one who let 3 properties fall out of compliance, I said, or who submitted doctored occupancy rates to retain investor confidence. At the rear of the room, Adrienne gave the signal. A team of Sloan Global legal staff began handing out sealed folders to select tables, board members, analysts, ratings officials, inside purchase records, audit logs, compliance reports. The woman you banned from your hotel, I continued now, holds 51.2% of Paramount Holdings, which means this room, this company, and every square foot of real estate your name touches now belongs to me. Dead silence. Even the music had stopped. My father stepped away from the podium as if it had betrayed him. That's not possible. You can't. We would have seen the filings. You didn't look, I said. That's always been the problem. You looked past me. Blake stumbled toward the stage, trying to play mediator. Jules, come on. You could have just talked to us, talked. I raised an eyebrow. Like the last time I presented to this board, when you mocked my proposal and offered to let me redesign the breakfast cart. He opened his mouth, closed it. The screens behind him now flashed executive portraits, his among them, next to financial irregularities. Luxury watches on the company card, dinners labeled vendor meetings held at nightclubs. You're done, Blake. I turned back to the crowd. For too long, this brand has traded on nostalgia and family pride. But pride doesn't fill rooms. It doesn't win back guests. And it certainly doesn't keep 5-star ratings when mold is growing in your penthouse showers. A man in the second row, the lead analyst for the Hospitality Ratings Board, nodded once sharply. The lights rose, reporters flooded forward. I stepped onto the stage, the champagne flute still in my hand. This isn't revenge, I said. It's renovation. And the room once their kingdom belonged to me. 3 days later, they showed up at my office without an appointment. Adrian tried to intercept them, but I told her to let them in. I was curious what version of themselves they'd bring, indignant, apologetic, or just desperate. They chose fury. My father stormed in, first red-faced barking about security codes being changed at corporate headquarters. My mother followed, eyes bloodshot pearls, slightly askew. And Blake looked like someone had erased his script, lost, unshaven, clutching a folder he didn't understand. How dare you lock us out of our own company? My father shouted, slamming both palms on my desk. I didn't flinch. This, I said, tapping the branded folder on the desk in front of me, is no longer your company. I pressed a button beneath the desk. Screens descended from the ceiling, 6 of them cascading into life. They displayed floor plans, rollout schedules, sustainability benchmarks, architectural renderings of modernized properties. The future of Paramount, no Sloan signature hotels, as the new branding now read. My mother sank into a chair, watching the transformation in real time. You're destroying everything we built. No, I said, I'm saving it. You were draining it for the sake of your name. I tossed them each a folder. Inside, you'll find performance reports, investor memos, and documentation of Blake's creative accounting. I turned toward him. You expensed a $3,000 bottle of wine at a vendor meeting that never happened. Twice. He turned pale. My father's voice dropped an octave. You won't get away with this. I smiled. I already have. Another screen flickered live footage from every Paramount lobby worldwide, each one in different time zones. One by one, the signs began to change. Logos dissolved. New ones replaced them. From Tokyo to Toronto, the brand transformed, a synchronized choreography of progress. You! My mother clutched her chest, stunned. Do you know what this will cost? $2 billion, I said. Already paid. Already executed. I let the silence stretch, then spoke gently. You have 2 options. Sign the contracts in front of you and retain a combined 3% as silent shareholders, or refuse, and I'll buy you out entirely. At market value, of course, which after last quarter's performance won't be much. My father's jaw clenched. You're threatening us. No, I said. I'm offering closure. He opened the folder. My mother didn't. Blake just stared at the monitors like he was watching a planet vanish. Adrian stepped in quietly. Board meeting begins in 10. I turned toward the door. You're welcome to stay. Or go. But either way, this story is already being written without you. I didn't wait for their answer. I walked into the boardroom alone, and every chair turned toward me. The boardroom was full, shoulders squared. Suits, crisp silence. Expectant. I stood at the head of the table. No stage, no elevation. Just eye contact, just control. The restructuring proposal is in front of you, I began. We'll begin with operational audits across all properties. Redundant departments will be merged. AI-integrated guest systems go live next quarter. Sustainability retrofits begin immediately at our top-tier locations. A few brows rose. One hand jotted notes. Another tapped quietly on a screen. And the brand, I said, will relaunch under Sloan Signature Hotels in 90 days. Full rollout, all regions. A pause, then a hand went up. The woman from the 5-Star Hospitality Consortium. Ms. Sloan, do you anticipate resistance from legacy stakeholders? I didn't look at the hallway doors. I didn't need to. I expect discomfort, I said, but growth never asked for permission. A few smiles, 2 quiet nods. The vote was called. 11 raised hands, 0 against. By afternoon, the press conference was live. Flashes, reporters, Questions lined up like accusations. Juliette, what led to this takeover? Was this revenge? Do your parents have a role now? I answered calmly, factually. Until one younger reporter asked, what would you say to those who think legacy should be honored, not overthrown? I held his gaze. Legacy isn't marble halls or inherited seats, I said. Legacy is what we leave better than we found it. I didn't overthrow a legacy, I rescued one. That night, Adrian placed an envelope on my desk. No logo, just handwriting I knew too well. Inside, we were wrong. So very wrong. If you ever want to talk, Mom. I read it twice. Then I slid it into a drawer next to the first hotel lobby sketch I made when I was 13. Back then, I showed it to my parents. My father laughed. My mother said, that's cute, honey. But real architecture is a man's game. Now that sketch sat beside a $40 million renovation plan. Adrian appeared again. They're ready for you. Who global directors? First summit, you're opening. I stood adjusting my suit. As I passed the glass wall, I caught a reflection. Not the girl they ignored, not the consultant they dismissed, but the woman who rewrote the blueprint and built it herself.